Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
The candidates for Wicomico County Executive squared off in a debate on the campus of Salisbury University this week. The battle over the Confederate flag at the Marvel Museum in Sussex County got heated at the Georgetown Town Council. In an exclusive interview, we talked with County Council member John Riley about how he sees that debate. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. The auditorium in Salisbury University's Holloway Hall filled up to hear the county executive candidates battle it out this past Tuesday. Republican candidate Julie Giordano faced off against Democratic candidate and Wicomico County Council member Ernie Davis and Libertarian candidate Salisbury City Council member Mir Boda. In our studio this morning is Greg Bassett. He's editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent newspaper. So, Greg, I want to turn to you, and I want to first of all just simply talk about style, because in Julie Giordano's opening statement, she seemed to invoke a great many symbols that one does not necessarily think of as being part of a local municipal debate that generally involve mundane issues such as clean water or traffic congestion. And I want to play just a little piece of that, give you a sense about what that sounded like.
My heart beats Republican red, and I back the blue, and I bow my head in prayer. And in my house and in my classroom, respect is earned, and hard work is recognized and rewarded. I salute our soldiers and veterans and honor our fallen heroes. I live and breathe by our Constitution. This county and the people in it mean everything to me, and I will be your voice, and I will fight for you each day.
So what do you make of that style? I mean, normally I don't hear the grand concepts that she was putting forth in a municipal election when you generally talk about other things.
Yeah, dinosaurs like us were taught, Don, that, all politics is local, but I think we see a nationalization of our local races occurring, certainly with party lines from both parties. And this is a Republican talking point. Not that the Democrats certainly don't have their talking points as well. But she really defined who she is, and you have to admire that. It's really in lockstep with how a lot of the people here on the Lower Shore feel about things. And the red and blue, it's kind of almost a stereotype, but that's who she is, and I have no doubt that she's being sincere.
Because she seemed more like a professional politician than she does someone who's running for office, people even who have been in office for a while, like Ernie Davis or even Mir Boda. I mean, there seems to be a certain professionalization taking place, certainly in the way she talks and the words and phrases that she uses, although I noticed that from time to time she would, look down at, I presume to be notes.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that's probably true. Usually when you have citizen politicians, there are people who are sort of learning the ropes of a political system. They have a sort of an ideological background that they were sort of raised in, and it's less a by the book thing or a formula for running. But we see that changing, certainly with social media and with talk radio. You kind of learn the phrases and the things that matter. When you get out and you get among people, you pick up on phrases that they say to you, their concerns, and you're able to echo that back. I think that shows that she's doing a lot of door-to-door, that she's out there, that she's very engaged, and she's hearing what people are saying, and she's reflecting that in terms of how she identifies herself.
So how do you assess, by the way, her campaign? What are you hearing out there?
Of the three campaigns, hers is certainly the most aggressive. She has the most events. She's raised the most money. She's the most active on social media. We see Ernie Davis finally getting a little bit involved in social media, but he's not out there as much. She's running a very aggressive campaign. She's got a campaign manager that she's paying. So she's got some professional advice, and she's got a lot of people around her, and it's definitely much more motivated, I think, than the other two campaigns.
I want to turn to Ernie Davis. He's been on the council for a long time, certainly touted his own experience there. How did you assess his performance?
Yeah, Ernie was weak in some spots. He kind of finished strong. What bothered me with all three candidates, the way the questions were structured, there's no criticism how the questions were, but it was like they asked a question, what is the role of the county executive? So the candidates had a chance to explain that. They asked about the revenue cap. So they were able to explain that. And I think there was a lot of factual stuff that was just wrong in terms of the history of the revenue cap and in terms of how the county executive model was adopted by the county in terms of what really matters. I think it revealed what they believe the job to be and what some of the issues are, but it just frustrated me that there was so much erroneous information based on fact, that they really didn't know how our government works. And that frustrated me, especially with Muir and with Ernie, who've been part of local government for so long. Julie actually, I think, did a little bit better than they did in terms of understanding how things work. She's not structuring her campaign based on the minutia of policy and how things are done, how things are operated. She's taking a leadership mantle on this thing. So it was a little bit different, but it was just frustrating. And I got very frustrated early listening to this thing because I was like, well, that's not true. And that's not what happened. And that's not why it is. And I tried not to seize on that and tried to look at the bigger picture about what they were doing.
Because Ernie seemed to be this sort of nuts and bolts kind of guy who talked about specific issues. It certainly didn't sound as if he prepared for the debate in any formal way, as opposed to, say, somebody like Julie. Yeah,
he had some of his talking points, certainly, but they were more of the kitchen table issues, you're right, and the things that are dominating the discussion in the county right now. He talked about the sewer, he talked about broadband. I thought maybe he was exaggerated a little bit in terms of how dire the situation is with broadband in the county. I think there, based on my reporting, there's a good solution underway for that. We were kind of late to the party getting that solution enacted, which he made a good point. But mostly it was the stuff that people are talking about. Miraboda, on the other hand, he presented a sort of a formula for blowing up how things work within the county government and starting again in terms of what the priorities are, what the processes are. So he had more of an imaginary thing. He wasn't as specific, but Ernie took like the 2 or 3 big topics that are of discussion right now in the county and identified what he thought should be done about those.
Now, one of the things I noticed was also that Giordano went after Davis at the very end. Here's a little bit of that.
Councilman Davis claims that Wacomico needs a jump start. And as a matter of fact, that's his slogan, Jumpstart Wacomico. I feel like your slogan is comparing Wacomico to a dead car on the side of the road with the current leadership. And with all due respect, I don't think Wacomico needs a jump start. A jump start is a temporary fix to a much larger problem. Wacomico doesn't need a jump start, it needs a whole new engine. And so it's time to bring active local leadership to Wacomico County.
As far as jump start, if you check the county for the last 8 years, the county has not moved. It's been stagnant. That's what I mean by jump start. It's not a car. We need to get this county moving, and I'm the person to do that. I have the energy and I have the expertise as far as energy, the business sense. Again, I've operated a business for 30 years with no problems. So I'm your candidate for county executive.
So what did you make of this assault that she had? And she seemed to imply that, he was endorsed by the teachers union, which seemed to be a negative as far as she was concerned, even though she herself is a teacher. And of course, she went after Miraboda with endorsements from the Progressive Caucus. What about that? What do you make of that?
Yeah, it was kind of surprising to me. I love, one of the things my father taught me was whenever someone says in a conversation, with all due respect, brace yourself because you're about to get insulted. And that kind of happened in that closing. I thought it was kind of harsh on Ernie. And I'm not sure I agree with either one of them. I'm not supposed to have an opinion on these things. I'm just supposed to say what I see. But I don't think the county has been stagnant at all. And certainly the city has shown enough leadership that buoys the entire county. But I don't agree with the lack of leadership stuff. I don't agree with the stagnancy stuff. So that's both of their points. Maybe I just don't get it. I don't know. But yeah, it's what you do in politics. You've got to take a shot at your opponent. She had a chance there at the end to do it. He responded pretty well to that. I was interested to see how he was going to respond. But it's her job. He's an elected person. He's in a Democratic majority county. She sees herself as the challenger against him. So she's got to make an attack. He didn't make the same attack except in rebuttal. But I thought it was an attack that probably landed pretty well on Ernie.
Because one of the things that he talked about not raising taxes and talked about how he was a former officer and that sort of thing. I mean, it seemed as if he was trying to address a couple of things that they didn't specifically mention in her attack, but nonetheless has been felt out on the campaign trail. I mean, are those claims against him resonating at all? What do you see?
Well, she has one of those check the boxes mailers, which is circulating. So she lists the three candidates and herself and where they stand on issues. And hers are, no new taxes. I forget what they all are exactly. But she paints both Muir and Ernie as being liberal on issues, and that, would raise taxes. Now, Ernie made the point in his rebuttal that they've never raised taxes since he's been on the county council, and that's true. He did sort of come out, no, not sort of, he came out in this debate as being someone who wants to look at the revenue cap of the county, which a lot of people will argue keeps the county's hands tied in terms of how it can raise funds, especially for education. That's where it's a concern. So that maybe taxes would have to go up, but the revenue cap really ties the hands of public officials in terms of what they can do in terms of the tax structure. So there's some concerns about that. It's also, and not to debate the revenue cap, but it's a 2.5% cap on how revenue can grow. You're in an 8% inflation market right now. So by theory, the county's losing 5.5%, 6% every year to inflation. They would have to cut taxes by another amount. There's all kinds of ways you can argue about that. So he is in favor of that. That's sort of a third rail around here. You're not, if you're anywhere on the right or a Republican, you're not allowed to be in favor of doing anything with the revenue cap. And Julie took that position. Ernie took the classic Democratic position, and the classic school board, the teachers' position, that they don't like the idea that that their hands are tied in terms of revenue.
Well, let's take a listen to how they addressed it.
And as far as the revenue cap is concerned, it will be left in place. I'm here to increase your quality of life in our county, not your property taxes. I plan to grow the business community here in our county, bringing more jobs and job opportunities, not just simply raising people's taxes. Right now, there are a lot of people hurting in this county, and the last thing they need is a property tax increase.
Right now, it's strangling the county. It's not going to hurt anyone. As you can notice, your property tax for the last several years has gone down because of the property tax, and you also need to look at what revenue as the county is bringing in is also dropping. With all the demands that's going to be placed on the county with the coming years, with the fire and EMS, with the airport, we need roads because of the state has cut the roads money. I'm not going to say we need to get rid of the tax cap, but we need to sit down with a group of people and educate ourselves and revamp the tax cap.
I think to some extent it's a good thing. Maybe there could be some minor tweaks to it, especially with the Here is Home that's coming, because you're looking at 8,100 units coming online, and the county essentially will be lowering property taxes for those that pay county property taxes. So is there something in there where, some of these properties that are coming along should pay their fair share like everybody else has, maybe. But I think the revenue cap in and of itself is a good thing and should stay in place.
One of the other issues that came up is affordable housing. And both Davis and Boda favored creation of affordable housing, but Giordano seemed to say, yeah, that's important, but, and then went on to talk about the inadequacy of infrastructure, as if almost sort of sidestepping the issue. What did you make of that?
Well, affordable housing ends up being more of a city issue for some reason than a county issue. So what goes on in the county, it's kind of the Wild West out there in terms of development and in terms of affordable housing. But the mayor in Salisbury has really made it a priority because of the rental situation. We've got so many rentals. And there is a housing shortage, which is driving up the price of rent. It's driving up the price of homes. So they have greatly expanded the amount of buildings that have been permitted, multifamily buildings, especially in Salisbury. So Mayor made the point that 800 new homes are about to come online, and in theory, any economic theory, a supply and demand situation that will help in terms of the housing, but it's not really a county issue in the same way. It seems to be a municipality issue.
So, in terms of the way she responded is that she seemed to say maybe we're okay when it comes to infrastructure, particularly with the wastewater treatment, but there are other cities like Delmarva, I guess, which has problems. She seems to put sort of certain distance about whether we needed affordable housing. I mean, did you get that impression?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I just felt like she didn't think it was one of her issues. Now, she has come out very strongly in favor of the municipal water situation. Now, how that gets implemented, that's going to show another side of politics, whether people hook into the Salisbury plant or they have package plants or municipal plants out there in the more rural areas and dealing with the problems in Delmarva and certainly in Pittsville and in Willards. So how all that gets resolved is going to be an issue. But she's very articulate about that. She seems to really understand the problem that's going on in the old Ocean City Road neighborhoods. She saluted the Greater Salisbury Committee and the work of the sewer panel that they have in place. So she seems to get it in terms of sewer. So I got to give her a lot of credit for that.
Also, the other big issue that caught my eye was the Police Accountability Board and the debate over whether that should happen. Here's what the candidates had to say.
This accountability board, I don't like it at all. I'm not saying accountability isn't good. It is good, but this was based on reactive legislation. We are building the plane as we fly it with the guys that put on bulletproof vests every single day. We have citizens that are going to get a 40-hour class to make decisions and judge somebody on a split-second decision. I don't agree with it at all. Now, I know that it's coming down from the state, and there's not much that I can do.
I'm a former retired state trooper, and I look at it like this. If you're out there doing your job, you're doing what you're supposed to do, you don't have anything to worry about. I think this accountability bill is for those few police officers, those bad police officers that are out there doing what they shouldn't be doing. 99% of the police officers, and I look at the ones in Wycomico, they're doing a fine job. If they're out there doing their job, they don't have anything to worry about as far as this accountability bill.
I think with any profession, accountability is good. In this situation, and this is from someone whose municipality has a police department, we have our own processes for accountability within Salisbury. This legislation, unfortunately, and a lot of this is stuff being shoved down to municipalities. And the requirements for many of the positions, I think one of the concerns was, who are we going to find for a chair? Because they didn't know if they had anybody that was retired with, I think it was 20 years that they were required to be the chair. So there are a lot of issues like that I just don't like it when the state rams stuff down our throat. And then with it comes a whole bunch of other mandates of you have to do this, you have to do this.
Well, so what did you make of the debate over this police accountability?
I thought it was a good debate because it was a debate about philosophy. Now, the problem with the debate is that really none of it matters because, as he says, the state has shoved it down the local government's throats. But there's a reason for that. There's concern about police accountability nationwide. We all know what's been going on, and you can tell why. You can understand why politicians in Annapolis want to have some sort of formal system so it's applied, equally across the state. So there aren't some jurisdictions that are looking the other way on issues, that there is some accountability across the board. So you understand why that would work. And the idea is that people who are on these commissions, these boards, have some sort of law enforcement experience. So they're not just complete babes in the woods in terms of understanding what a police officer's job is and how things can go wrong. With that said, the acting county executive, Posada, did make a bunch of appointments to that board within the mandated timeline. The county council unanimously approved everyone that he had recommended, and we're going to go on this thing. Now, when there are complaints, they have to get to a certain level before they get to that board, and it's going to be interesting to see how that stuff is handled. But at the same time, it's sort of it is what it is kind of thing. As the county executive, when you appoint members of that board, that will say a lot. But just to be against the thing, I just wonder about in terms of philosophy. If there's not a problem, it's not a problem. But maybe there is a problem, and these boards will help solve any of these problems. We'll see how many problems there are because it'll be done with some light, which I'm always in favor of, that where the public can see what's going on so that we know where accountability lies, that we can see where our problems are and how to identify them. And already in politics, you have our sort of county police force now is the sheriff's office. Sheriff is accountable to the voters. So if there is, corruption or misdeeds within the county sheriff's office, that would be certainly telegraphed, and a sheriff can be held accountable to the voters for that. So I think the same thing happens with a county executive or a county council in terms of police accountability.
Just briefly, what do you make of her attack on the people who were nominated? She seemed to indicate they didn't have the experience. Is that true? You follow this stuff pretty closely.
Yeah, based on what I saw from the appointments, and I don't know all of them, but I thought it was a pretty good cross-section of people in the community. It was certainly a diverse group, which was good. And the person who leads it, as she says, as part of the state legislation, has to be a retired or someone who was a former officer who understands these things, who can explain to fellow board members, okay, this is how it works, this is why this could have happened. But yeah, you're always going to have people who might not understand it, who might go in there with bad intentions to sort of undermine the police. The police don't want it, by and large. Many of the police don't want it because they don't want the negative publicity that goes with that, or the negative feelings. They don't want people who don't understand their jobs to evaluate how they do their jobs. And as a reporter, I completely understand that. Readers evaluate how I do my job all the time, and I want to say you don't understand how my job works, but that doesn't matter because they are the readers, and they are entitled to question how I do my job. And the same thing happens, I think, with citizens. We're allowed to wonder why the police do things the way they work, why they do.
So finally, just briefly, so what did you make of the overall of the debate? Was it helpful, do you think?
Yeah, these things, they're not really debates, they're forums, which is kind of annoying. At the same time, I guess we're not going to have another one like this. Sometimes some of the little groups will have their own little forums, and sometimes they're publicized, sometimes they're not. I know on the PAC 14 show and one-on-one that I do, I'm going to interview all the different candidates for the different offices, and we'll evaluate these people as well. They did have an opportunity to ask each other a question, which was interesting in this. But at the same time, you kind of got the tone of what's going on with the race. You kind of have the stage set for what happens the next 5 weeks while this thing goes on. Early voting is at the end of the month, at the very end of October. That last Thursday of October is when it starts. So it sort of sets the stage for things, and I would really recommend that people go back to the PAC 14 website on YouTube and watch this, because you could really get a sense. I've watched it 3 times now. My opinion about it when I watched it live was very different than it was when I watched it in a measured way the 3rd time. And I just think it's a great exercise, but you can never be too informed as a voter in terms of what you're going to do, because this is a really interesting race with really dynamic candidates, and it's going to chart a new course for our county.
We've been speaking with Greg Bassett. He's editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us this morning.
Thanks, Don.
We now turn to the battle over the Confederate flag that stands on the grounds near the Marvel Carriage Museum that's owned by the Georgetown Historical Society. It heated up this past Monday, with the Georgetown Council voting 3-2 again to reaffirm allocating $24,000 to the society despite the presence of the flag. And it came after a presentation by the NAACP calling for withdrawing the funds. Flora McKendall, second vice president of the NAACP's State Leadership Conference.
I hope by now you all can see why they serve as a repulsive symbol of hate and oppression and violence and white privilege. Not 150 years ago when the Civil War was lost, but even today.
Town council meeting was at times an acrimonious one. And after the vote, McKendall vowed that the NAACP would continue to push for removal of the flag. Meanwhile, the Sussex County Council has already provided $2,000 of its own to the Georgetown Historical Society. We caught up with Councilmember John Riley to talk about how he saw the controversy surrounding the flag.
The Georgetown Historical Society does a tremendous amount of good work for not only Georgetown, but for the county in telling the story of our history and preserving the history for future generations to see. How you interpret that history and present it, I think is really what the question is here. And so should the flag be flown, or should it be, displayed in a case, or should it not be displayed at all? Mm-hmm. Those are some of the questions. Now, the Historical Society evidently has an agreement of some kind with an organization that actually owns the flag and the monument and has control over how it's displayed. I feel that at this point the flag and the monument are becoming a distraction and almost getting in the way of the Historical Society fulfilling their mission. So I'm hopeful that there can be some accommodation reached where they either deed that property away or they just determine that they're going to display it in a way that's, cultural norms change over time. People's attitudes change over time. We should never forget history. We should learn from it. But the question is, how do we tell the story? And I strongly support the mission of the Historical Society. I don't want to see them, starved for resources and falter in their mission. But this question is going to have to probably get resolved here, hopefully sooner than later.
Would you like to see the flag come down?
I don't have the offense around it that a lot of people do, because I recognize what it is. I know the South lost. I mean, there's no question. I also know that the Southern soldiers were repatriated and had full status as U.S. soldiers. And that's just historical fact. What troubles me is that it is truly offensive to some people. And so the question is, do you have a right to not be offended? Where does free speech end? Because there's a chance you might be offended. I think that we are probably pushing down that road towards cancel culture a little bit too hard, and that's troubling to me. I would like to see people be able to express their point of view and be respectful of other people's point of view. My preference would be, if they're going to display that flag, they should have an American flag there as well and at a higher level, and that the Union soldiers should be remembered there as well. It's interesting to note there was actually a small skirmish fought on South Bedford Street right here in Georgetown, and not far from the museum, and several soldiers were killed and wounded right there. So it is local history, and I want my children to understand the terrible price that was paid by both sides, that because they could not resolve their differences politically, they resorted to violence. And we never want to do that again. We never want to go down that road. It's particularly in today's day and age. I mean, we're not fighting with muskets anymore. So, that is a lesson that I want to be certain that my children understand. And if flying that flag helps me to tell them that story, then it's a valuable lesson.
I guess so the question that for a lot of people is, does it really tell that lesson, certainly the way it is now? And secondly, that flag, beyond simply the Civil War, was certainly used during the opposition, for instance, to desegregation, the opposition to. So that it's taken on not just simply a Civil War dimension, but also in recent history, sort of racism against the civil rights movement. What do you think about that in terms of whether or not it really tells you a story of any kind?
Yeah, and that's where it comes down to, how are we presenting the flag? How are we displaying it? Should it be flown with, the full honors as it seems to be now, or should it be displayed in a case? We're going to watch this play out, I think, over the next year, because I don't think the issue is going away.
Do you think this is another sort of Talbot Boys moment? There was a movement to remove the Confederate statue in Easton. Do you think that's what we're seeing now?
I think it is the same spirit behind it, I guess. The crux of the issue is, do we wipe away all these touchstones of our past and remove them from sight? For example, Caesar Rodney's statue up on Rodney Square in Wilmington is no longer there. Christopher Columbus's statue is no longer in Wilmington. Maybe they should be displayed in a museum somewhere, where people can go see it, as opposed to centrally located in the middle of a square. It's the change of culture over time that I think we're wrestling with. And, You're right about the Confederate flag being used in political movements that were quite unsavory and, really, did not do justice to that flag. We are in a very different kind of age politically where, things, it feels like the 60s almost, where there's just a lot of, a lot of strife and people pointing fingers and not talking. And, we need to listen to the point of view of other people and try to understand it and be sensitive to it. At the same time, your right to speech should not be diminished by my right to not be offended.
Right.
And that's another balance that is tricky to find. Sure. So we're seeing it play out here, But I think when people start, throwing around charges of racism and, you're a racist because of this or because of that, that gets troubling and problematic. One of the issues that I think the museum supporters have had is it seems to be a slippery slope that when you remove that flag, then they'll want to remove the monument. And if they remove the monument, then it'll be something else, and what hill do you want to make your stand on, so to speak? And, I guess if you take that approach, you're not necessarily listening to the other side. And so I understand that, when we make grants to the museum, we are not supporting that flag or the monument in any way. The museum doesn't own it. And money that we give is not intended to promote or enhance that in any way. They have a bigger story to tell, and we want to help them do it. And I hope this gets resolved amicably and soon, because it's just, it's an unfortunate thing. And, I'm sure it is painful to some people that, they see that there and they can't understand why anybody would ever want to, give glory to that.
Certainly the African American community is offended by it. Mm-hmm. So what do you say to them?
It is history. I understand that. I think if it's not being displayed in a way that is attempting to create division or cause strife, then it's appropriate. But if that is the intention, then it's not appropriate. We see a lot of issues with, for example, Black Lives Matter. Now we're getting into some dangerous political territory here, I guess. But some of the things that they have been espousing are troubling to me. Mm-hmm. But do they have a right to? They don't have a right to burn down cities, but they have a right to express their point of view and to not be shouted down simply because they hold that point of view. That the First Amendment is really the cornerstone to our liberty here in the United States, and the antidote to speech that you don't like is more speech, not less speech. So I would encourage the dialogue. I would encourage all people to be heard, and try to be understanding of the sensibilities of other people and why they might feel that way.
Sussex County Council member John Riley on the Confederate flag issue at the Marvel Carriage Museum. Tom Marvel, grandson of another Marvel who founded the museum in 1968, says the flag does not represent the family's values, and if it is not taken down in a timely manner, the family would like their name taken off the museum. Sussex County Council member John Riley on the Confederate flag issue at the Marvel Museum. This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.